Go grab your knitting. Go do your knitting a little bit. Are you not knitting today? So. Welcome to another episode of That Portuguese Knitter. Today we'll have a Q&A for you. So in the last episode, I asked you to make me some questions about me, my knitting, my life, and I was very afraid that no one would send me any questions. So in the end, I'm very grateful that I had a lot of interesting questions from you that I'll be able to answer today. So first of all, let's talk about what I'm wearing. This is my Scarborough shawl. It's not the first time in the podcast that I'm wearing it. It's my favorite because at this point, spring is almost here. Today is a little bit overcast, but rather than that, the sun has been shining finally after months of heavy rain here in Portugal. So yeah, I'm very grateful for this change of scenery. And yeah, I shared about this pattern before. It is a pattern by Fiber Tales, one of my favorite knitwear designers. And I knitted in Knitting for Olive Merino and Soft Silk Mohair in the color linen. And I really love this luxurious shawl. She is working on a very similar pattern, but in a heavier yarn, I guess. That is also very beautiful, but this is my favorite shawl from her. This has been my staple during the last few days because whenever I want and I feel a little bit warmer, I just take it out and then I layer it in the evenings or in the beginning of the day. I'm not talking about my finished projects or WIPs or acquisitions in this episode because I wanted to focus on the Q&A. But of course, I decided that during the Q&A I will knit because I wanted this to feel like a, chat with you. And because of that, I will at least mention what I'm doing. And I'm working on my Ivy sweater by Petite Knit. And I'm holding two yarns from Knitting for Olive Merino in the color pale blue, and a Surya Parka by Fiber Spades. It's called Cumulus, that I got from the frog project that we'll talk about today. And I ended the body, as you can see, and now I'm working on my first sleeve. And so let's move on with the Q&A. The first question is, have people in your family always knitted? Did you learn from them? And my answer is yes. My mom, my grandmother, my aunts were all knitters, not, all-time knitters. They just grabbed a project whenever they liked to do one. But yes, I learned basically all the crafts I know from them. But knitting has been a little bit of a different journey. I actually have an aunt that she knitted a lot and used it to start knitting in the end of summer, about end of August, beginning of September, and she would knit consistently until Christmas, one sweater for every nephew. I must say, at one point, we were 8 nephews, so yeah, you can imagine. But I remember almost every pattern that she knitted for us. Some years the pattern was the same for all of us, but other years she will knit different patterns. Maybe one pattern for the girls, one pattern for the boys. I remember having one in light pink with a piggy face on the front and the piggy tail on the back, and another one which was one of the Donald Duck nephews. I don't really remember which one, and it had his face on the front and his bottom on the back. I remember having one textured white hoodie with wooden buttons on the front. And I remember having one pink one with a rosy pattern that really resembles the Lanit rosy sweater, I guess that's called. Yeah, and it made me think about that sweater when I saw the pattern. So I guess trends are coming and going. My mom was not, well, she did everything, a little bit of everything, and I learned several crafts from her. But yeah, she also knitted. My father still has a sweater that she made for him. He still uses it today. Mainly around the house, not because it's not good, but styles have changed, but he still uses it. And I also remember my grandmother knitting some bedspreads for my dogs. Another question is, do you knit Portuguese style? Well, as you can see, I do. This is the way I was taught how to knit, and I also work a little bit of English style, the one you throw the yarn, when I do color work, just to be able to separate the two colors properly. But I know there's a way to do it in the Portuguese style. Rosa Pomar has a video or a tutorial about that. So I know it's possible to do it, but to be honest, when I started to work color work, I just found my way of doing it. And yeah, I just didn't follow the rules, just followed my intuition and the way it suits me better. I would love to knit continental, just to have some variation and to develop different muscles in my hands. But yeah, Portuguese style is my favorite one because it is good on purling too, it is good on knitting, it is good to a consistent tension. And yeah, the one thing it's not good for is for unspun yarn, because the tension is greater with the Portuguese style, so you probably will break your unspun yarn a lot if you do it in the Portuguese style. And that's one of the reasons I would love to try continental, because I would love to try some unspun yarn. Is that how you learn to knit? Yes, from the first time, I have to say I learned to knit twice, but both times I learned the Portuguese style. And who inspired you to start knitting? Well, my family being so handmade minded. My mom knows to do a little bit of everything, including knitting. I just grew up on that mindset. So I just wanted to use my hands and learn everything I could do in my hands. So I always had access to craft materials, and my mom was always available for me to teach me anything I wanted and to make the materials available for me. So yeah, because I saw my family knitting, especially my aunt, I always wanted to learn it. Another question is, when did you start knitting? Who taught you how to knit? Well, I guess I was about 14 the first time I learned to knit. And I say that I learned to knit twice, because the first time I was taught by my mom, and she taught me well, but she totally forgot to mention the position of your working yarn in relation to your needle. So she totally forgot that this was an integral part of the knitting. And so because of that, I was continually making yarn overs, and of course my end result was not great. And I got very, very frustrated with that. I didn't understand what was happening. She didn't observe my knitting, so she wasn't able to figure what I was doing wrong. And so I tried and tried and tried, and I never understood what I was doing wrong. In addition, in Portugal, some knitting needles have a hook in the tip, like a crochet hook. It's very frequent in the north of the country, and these are reminiscent of some specific sock knitting needles that, for you to be able to knit while you're taking care of your children or taking care of your home, etc., that prevents the stitches to drop off. And I don't really know how it stuck here in Portugal, but yeah, many people still use those needles. I don't think they provide the best experience of knitting, at least for me, and also not the best results. So both factors led me not to pursue knitting for a while. But then when I was about 20, knitting was, kept coming to my mind. So I decided to go to Ovelha Negra, which is my local yarn shop. And the store was open for about 1 year when Joanna Nossa, which is the owner, started to do some knitting classes. And I went for one, and from that point on, I never stopped. So this is an interesting one. What does your son think of your knitting? Well, he loves it. I mean, we do a very limited amount of screen time at home, but sometimes we get together and we see some movies or cartoons, and we do it always together. And not always, but sometimes I grab my knitting to, make some more rows. And when I don't, he sometimes asks me to. Mom, go grab your knitting. Mom, go do your knitting a little bit. Please, are you not knitting today? So I think he sees knitting as part of my lifestyle, as well as other handmade things that I do. He sees me doing, or he does with me, like from scratch meals or sourdough bread or gardening, etc. But yes, he has always something to say about my knitting. He sometimes asks me to show him what I'm working on, and he will say, I like it or I don't like it. Did you finish that sweater for daddy, or when are you doing something else for me? Are those socks for me, or are those socks for daddy? Are those socks for you? Yeah, he loves to do it, and sometimes he puts the yarn around his neck and just pick holes on my on my projects, so like he too is knitting somehow, which is very cute. So, what was your favorite project from last year? I talked about this in my What I Need in 2025 video, that my favorite project from last year was my wishbone sweater from Kutavakika. I talked a little bit more about the details of this pattern in that video, so I can link that below for you. But yeah, I feel this is a very luxurious project, and actually it's not very difficult at all. So yeah, I think the result is much more has much more impact than the actual process. So do you have any knits you're planning to frog? Yes, I do, and I frogged my first one already. As I said, I'm using this Surrey alpaca from a project from last year. And that project was my cognac sweater. I used this in combination with a superwash merino wool from Mino Works. That it is beautiful. It's nothing about the yarns themselves, not about the pattern, but it is the combination of yarns that I choose to use that it's not suitable, because either the alpaca and the superwash merino can stretch a lot in the hand, and that it was exactly what happened. And because of that, I was not fond of the results, and I decided to frog it, which was, a pain to frog, especially this. But yeah, I asked for help, and I was as patient as I could get, and in the end I was able to do it. It's not impossible, it's not the most enjoyable task, but yeah, if you want to do it, go for it. You can do it. You just have to be patient and maybe get a little bit of help from someone else. And the other project I'm planning to frog is my Sweet Breeze top by Kutabakika. I knit this in pure silk from Knitting for Olive, and yeah, I don't really like the result because I guess I met the gauge, but I didn't met the fabric that I had in mind. And yeah, it is a little bit light for the type of project. I really like the pattern itself, but I don't think that yarn is the most suitable unless you hold two yarns together. But yeah, I don't think I am planning on just frogging and making the same project. What I'm planning to do is to maybe try another project, another t-shirt. I thought about making my first ever ranunculus. So if you have some advice on that, or if you have another pattern that you want to suggest me to use that pure silk, please let me know. But yeah, I maybe will try the ranunculus for the first time. Another question is, I'd also like to know if you are happy with your needle acquisitions you showed us in autumn, what you like about them and what you don't like, and if you recommend them. And my general answer is yes, I'm very happy with my acquisitions. I bought at the time a kit from Thiago, the complete set for interchangeable needles, and other one for the shorties, which I'm using to knit socks, and a set of interchangeable wooden needles by Lika. These are the ones I'm using at the moment, and I'm very happy with them. The cables are not as good as Thiago because they're more like the ones from Knit Pro, but the union between the needle and the cable is swivelable, which means that they don't get in the way as the Knit Pros do. So I'm very happy with them because the needle themselves are very smooth, much more smoother. And it happened to me with the knit bros, the wood splitted, and so I'm not experienced that with my licas, and I think they're much more smooth than the knit bros, so I'm very happy with them. Regarding the Thiago, until I bought this, I was using my Adis, the lace ones, but I like the Thiagos better, and I also like the cables. But I must say, this kit was the one that changed a lot for me, because until I bought this, I was not a sock knitter at all, and I was using these needles from Knit Pro Zing, but I didn't like them because the union between the needle and the cable was there was just a slump between the two, so I had to be very loose with my stitches, and because of that my gauge was all around the place. In the end, I didn't like the results. Some socks were one size, the other socks were a bit tighter or a bit looser, and I knew that it was all about my experience with my needles. So I invested in these, and I'm loving it. The one thing it's not a complaint, it's just it would be better if there were two pairs of the cables so I could knit the two socks at the same time. And there isn't. I understand why, you just get one of each cable or each size cable, but I will invest in another pair of cables so I can do that, because for me the experience is much better when I can knit the two socks at the same time. But yeah, I'm very, very, very happy with my Thiagos and very, very happy with my licas. If I had to choose one of them, I might go for the Thiagos because I think they're more versatile. So yeah, I would buy it anyway. The Lica, I just bought them because I really like wooden needles, and sometimes I get the best experience with wooden needles instead of using metal. But yeah, if you can do only one investment, go for the Thiagos. But if you can go a little bit further, maybe spaced in time, I advise you to go for the Lica too. Someone is asking me if there are differences in crafts in your regions versus others, and my answer is yes. Despite Portugal is a small country, we have several crafts that are characteristic of different regions. I will say knitting is widespread around the country, but we do it in different ways, I guess. And we have some patterns that are specific from some regions. Perhaps camisolas poveiras are from here, from the north of the country. We have lots of lace socks in Minho, Meias dos Namorados in Montemuro, specific socks from Serra d'Ossa that are very interesting because they resemble this virile pattern, which is interesting because we're not near the same location. We have knitted hats in Açores and Madeira for the men to use, especially the ones working at sea, and several knitted bags around the country. You can see a little bit of those patterns in a specific book by Rosa Pomar. This one is in Portuguese. It is called Malhas Portuguesas, but you can have it in English. I think it's called Portuguese knitting, I guess. But yeah, here you can see several traditional patterns. I'm sorry for the sun, but oh well. Those are the lace knittings, the lace socks from Minho. Let me see if I can show you the ones that resemble Fair Isle. Here they are. And so yeah, but we work the wool in other many ways. This is the poveiras. yeah, if you can get your hands on this book, you'll learn a lot about Portuguese knitting, not only the Portuguese style of knitting, but also some traditional designs. And she, of course, afterwards has some knitting patterns inspired on these traditional designs. Of course, that regarding other crafts, we do have embroidery, we do have weaving, etc. I can tell you about the needlework from Castelo Branco, or the needlework from Arraiolos, the weaving in mantas alentejanas and mantas de Mindas, which are blankets from Alentejo and Ribatejo, and they're very strict about their differences. But we all have ceramics, the work in linen, rendas de bilros, which are very common in Peniche, and Vila do Conde, which is near Póvoa do Varzim, where the Poveiras are from. But yeah, I think if there's a craft, there's a Portuguese version of almost everything, I will say. Another question is, do you work outside of the home as well as your YouTube channel, and what is your professional background? Yes, I do work full-time on another job. I am a biologist and I pursued my PhD in science communication, and I work in science research communication in the major university in Portugal. That being said, I am craving for a career change, maybe in the next 5 years. And yeah, I would love to have a second act in my professional life in a very different area. So where I could focus on my creative skills, on learning another skills, and being more at home, being more with my family, and invest in my family and invest in being together. I'm working on that, and I'm wishing for a good transition between these two acts. But I love second act stories, and I love that people don't see their careers as a fate that you have to carry for the rest of your life. And so I would love to have my opportunity and a second act in my life regarding my professional life. Another question, I would like to know if you have a favorite knitwear designer, and are there others who you would like to try knitting a pattern from? Well, I don't have many favorite knitwear designers, and I think it's because I consider me not a beginner knitting, but not a long time knitter, and so I have a lot of patterns that I would like to experiment. So I think I'm yet to discover my favorite designers, but at this point I have to say I love Hypertail's aesthetic. I also love Sari Nordland's work on lace. I think she's very talented working lace. I love Anne Wenzel contemporary feel, I guess. I love Andrea Mori's designs and fit. I think she's very good at fit. I also love Lenit, especially her tees, and if I'm working on some summer knits this year, I might work in one of her tees. And I love also Gustavo Kike's basic approach and relaxed approach to knitting. I'm not in love with petite knit patterns. I think they're basic. They're not the most beautiful patterns in the world, but I guess she's very consistent and very clear on their patterns, and because of that, I have to say that I ended up knitting lots of her, and I am still working on lots of her patterns because of these characteristics. She's very consistent, she's very clear, her writing patterns, her patterns are very basic, that what sometimes it is what you want to wear. So yeah. Also, are there Portuguese knitwear designers you can tell us about? I would love to know more about Portuguese designers and if they have colorwork or if they incorporate Portuguese traditional designs. So yeah, my favorite Portuguese designers, one of is Rosa Pomar, and as I told you before, in this book there are lots of designs that are inspired by the Portuguese traditional designs. But she has other ones, and lots of them are in colorwork. This is a traditional striped sock. This is it is inspired by socks from also Palmeiras. These are also inspired by Minda blankets, which are from the region of Ribatejo. These are inspired on the socks from Montemuro. This is inspired by the tapetes or rugs, the crivos from Miranda do Douro. This is a bag, but you can also use this pattern for, a sweater or something like that, which will be very interesting. But yeah, she has a lot of these designs also on Ravelry, so if you want to get them, you can also go there. But yeah, we do have some colorwork. As you can see, our colorwork is not the same as the Icelandic ones or the Scandinavian ones. But yeah, we mostly work socks, we mostly work hats, we do have some sweaters. And what Rosa did was to create contemporary designs that used some of these traditional designs in her patterns. But she also has other types of patterns that are not inspired on traditional designs, that are also colorwork, and they are very, very interesting. I might be starting Camisola das Ovelhas, which it's also called in English the Sheep Sweater by Rosa Pomar. So yeah, it is a beautiful sweater, very interesting, all over colorwork, and it has 3 pieces of sticking, which might be interesting. But yeah, I love her designs. I also love Vert Knits. She's called Ines, and I have her matcha sweater on my favorites and on my queue for a long time. I don't think I will make it before the summer comes, but yeah, I might begin that project in the autumn so I can use it through the next season. Also, we do have Filipa Carneiro, which is well known, at least here in Portugal, knitwear designer. I actually have not knitted anything from her yet, but yeah, she's very well known here in Portugal. So I have a colleague that is starting to work on her own designs. She's called Jane the Knitter. You can find her on Instagram. So if you want some inspiration for a beginner knitwear designer, you can find her there. So can you share your favorite knitting and yarn podcasts? Yes, I can, and I am a great consumer of yarn and knitting podcasts. That's my go-to while I'm knitting. So yeah, I have a lot that I can share with you. I would say that I love Laura Penrose's podcasts, also Marlene Knits. I like Those Twins Who Knit. I like Fiber Tales, of course. Sophie Knits Daily, which is a new but very interesting podcasts. I also like Studio Well Held, Kutava Kika and Cyril Norland new podcast. It is called Newton Tell. I also like Knit Chick, Woozy by Celine, Young Phone Knits, Breathing Yarn, M Days, which is a crocheter from Israel, Sydney Graham, which she's mostly a sewer, but she started to knit some time ago. And I also like Woolen Twine. She is a yarn dyer from Germany, and I never knitted with her yarns, but I love to see what she's working on. I also like her aesthetic, and I like to see how she does her work. What was a project you loved and a project that you disliked, and why? As I said before, I love to work on my wishbone sweater by Kutava Kika, and the reason is because the results look so much more difficult than it actually is. It looks like a very luxurious sweater, and so the impact versus the project is perfect. You get a not that difficult project to work on and a very interesting outcome. So yes, this is, at least until now, my favorite knit. And let me say, I hated to work on my cognac sweater. It's not about the pattern, it was about my yarn choice. But I understood pretty early that the result would not be the one I thought it would be, but I pursued, and I think I shouldn't have pursued, but being as I am, I just wanted to finish the project I began, and in the end I would hate it. I never used it. I put it once or twice just to see, and I didn't like it. So yeah, that was the worst project of my life until today. Is there a type of fiber that you've never used and would like to? Yes, believe it or not, being Portuguese and linen being a traditional fiber here in Portugal, especially for weaving, I never tried to work with linen, so I would love to. So yeah, if you have some suggestions of yarns that are linen or linen blend, please share it with me, because I would love to try them. How many hours a day roughly are you able to knit? What is your favorite time to knit? Well, at this point I feel privileged because I have a son. I have a little bit of time just for me that I would use otherwise before I became a mom to knit while he's asleep at night, which means that I can squeeze a few hours at night in the evenings, and because of that I'm not a daytime knitter, with some exceptions on the weekends, because I don't have the time to do it during the week. But yeah, I prefer to work on during the evenings because knitting relaxes me, but also in the mornings because I love to knit while I can sip a cup of tea, and the morning is still calm, there's no rush. But yeah, I mostly knit in the evenings after my son goes to sleep. Do you have some favorite Portuguese yarns? If so, why do you enjoy working with them? And yes, I have at least, I think, one favorite yarn from Portugal, which is Mondin by Rosa Pomar. For me, it's the perfect sock yarn. It's 100% wool, and it's not superwash. It's very soft, and I think nothing that I already experiment overtakes Mondin as a sock yarn, at least. And you can easily go and hold it double or maybe triple, to work several garments. I've just seen several people doing that, and I think the results are amazing. I'm going to try very soon the hair yarn called Portuguese. I already saw some, I touched it, and I already saw some swatches, and I am in love, so we'll see. I would love to know what you treasure the most about your knitting process and your most precious self-made item is. What I treasure the most, two things. The first one, the time I spend with myself, because I'm an introvert and I need a little bit of time with myself, and to be able to do something while I'm with myself it's very comforting. It's just like something is making me company. So that's one thing I love and I treasure about knitting process. The other thing I treasure is to do something with my hands that society keeps saying that I can just buy, and I choose not to. So I think working with my hands to do what I want instead of what society wants is the most beautiful thing about knitting for me, and it teaches me a lot about other things too, that I can be independent, I can have my lifestyle, my way of thinking, and be able to do it anyway and not be, as quote, normal. And my most precious thing, I think everything I needed from my son, because especially his Ellen's cardigan, I can show you a photo, because it marks the time in which, after being a mom, I stopped knitting for about 18 months, and after that time I restarted knitting with this Ellen's cardigan, and I felt so much joy at that point to be able to do it for my son again. And because, motherhood, especially for a new mom, can be very, very difficult. It takes over your life and everything you think is stable. And so when I restarted knitting, I felt that everything, it's okay again. And I could live with confidence and do everything and do those things for my son. So that piece of knitting holds a little bit more than it looks. I would love to hear your thoughts on how society views knitters, especially in Portugal. Well, great question, because as a general answer, I will say Portuguese still views knitters as the old-minded women that are lonely and have 30 cats, which is not true. But yes, it's a very, inadequate view of knitters, because we always have knitted, but at some point society told us that we shouldn't do those things are a waste of time. But more and more we're seeing younger and younger people trying to get into knitting, which is very interesting. But I still get the looks when I grab my knitting in public spaces. Sometimes people look like, what is that she's doing? Why is she knitting? Is this okay? Is this necessary or something? Even when I'm with friends, they don't really understand that if I'm knitting while speaking to them, I'm not distracted. I'm actually more concentrated than ever, because sometimes it's difficult to focus, and if there's something in your hands that allows you to use that little bit of energy, you can concentrate on what you're seeing and what you're hearing and what other people are talking to you a little bit more, which might seem difficult to understand, but this is how I feel. I would love if knitting would be more accepted in certain contexts, like in cinemas, like in conferences, if you are during a webinar or something. Yeah, in your lunch break. It is not very accepted. I would say that in cities things are changing because some foreign knowledge and habits are intertwining with ours, and so because of that, knitting might be having a boost in the next few years, I think. So I think that's all I have to say and have to share with you. I might be doing a little bit of more depth review of my needle collection, because I think some of you asked for that, as well as some of the books that I've been acquiring that are related to knitting. So that's all for me. I think it was very interesting for me to do this Q&A and see your lovely questions for me and your interest in my work and in my knitting. I hope you liked it. If you did, please consider subscribing to this channel. It will be lovely to see you on my next podcast. And for now, that's all I have to say. I will continue to knit a little bit so I can film a little bit for you. And I will see you on my next one. Bye.